Yeah, but you know what you could do with that. Yeah, I told him where he could deconverted man here. All right, so this is not evidence for God, more from cold case Christianity. It just gets worse. Yeah, they keep not making any case for God. But now we've got a little diagram that he came up with, or somebody came up with, that's completely incoherent. Uh, oh, yeah, let me check it out. Okay, so there's an accurate view of eternity. How about proof of eternity? That'd be nice. Proper reverence for free agency. Otherwise, we're robots. Don't want robots. Why? Whatever. Appropriate definition of love. You need that too. What? Who decides that? Well, I mean, obviously, the book does, or whatever. You know. So you're gonna walk backwards from the definition of love so that you can get there. I mean, that's how you're going to do that. Rolling character development. Okay, yeah. Power to draw us. What the bleep? Existence as a consequence, and then our limited understanding. Okay, yeah.
Role of free agency, the proper definition of love, how God might use this to develop our character, how God might even use this to call us to him. Also, the consequence of our behavior, just as justice demands. And finally, our limited understanding as humans. Now,
so all of this, basically, he thinks can excuse God doing nothing about evil. Now, some apologists have some definitions of evil, others have others. I've heard everything from evil is an absence of good, but God is supposed to be everywhere. So how could there be an absence of good? Evil is because of free will. I've heard that. This is kind of like, well, God allows evil because of all these things. See, there's you got to understand there's this accurate view of eternity that you have to understand. You have to understand that free agency requires evil to exist. And then if you have the appropriate definition of love, and then you have to account for the character development that evil might cause in somebody. And then see, evil actually is drawing you to God. See, and then that's the existence as a consequence. You know, it's just and then of course if all else fails, you don't know everything, so just shut up and stop asking questions. Oh, okay.
You can see the diagram is pretty complex. And I think for purposes of us discussing this, much of this is going to be in your participant's guide, okay? Because we can't go through all 8 or 7 of these pieces of evidence or reasoned explanations in one setting. But I will try to do a couple that I...
Well, why not? Well, I mean, it doesn't seem that complicated to me. But, okay. Yeah.
I think we're so foundational for me as an atheist, looking at the existence of God and trying to explain how evil could exist in the universe. Here's the first one. What do we mean when we say eternity changes everything? And it does in this equation. It's the first thing in the diagram.
Yeah.
Well, let's put it this way. When I was an atheist, I believed that my life was a line segment. Follow me. Starts with birth, ends with death. 2 points. There's a line in between. I wanted the line to be 90 years. Give me 90 years, 90 pain-free years. I don't want to ever suffer, ever experience any tragedies. I want to die peacefully in my sleep at the age of 90 after a very...
Man, you're short selling yourself. I'm going to 1,112. That's my goal. Now, I don't know if I'm going to make it, but if I'm going to have an insane goal, why not be 1,112? Hello. Okay.
Very full and enjoyable life. That was my hope, right? Because for me as an atheist, everything had to occur in those first 90 years. Now, if I'd have gotten sick with, say, a cancer or some other disease at 40 and suffered 10 years and died at 50, I'd have been upset. I would have...
Well, I mean, you might have been, let's just see where this insane idea is going, because I don't know what to make fun of yet.
Seen that as evil. Why? Because I had an expectation of 90 years on the timeline, and now the last half is being stolen from me. I'm not going to realize what I expected to begin with.
I've got a person at the door. Hold
I just seen that as evil. But what if my foundational notion of what life is was wrong to begin with? What if life is not a line segment, but is instead a ray that starts at birth, extends through a point we call our death, but then goes off infinitely, eternally into the future like a ray. That's what rays do. They start, go through a point, and continue indefinitely.
Yeah.
That would change everything. There are people who
are
watching.
So what did I miss? So I didn't miss anything. Okay, so if it continues on indefinitely, that changes everything. Why? I don't know.
Right now, maybe even in your group, that are watching this and have experienced some evil, some difficult surgery, maybe in the first few weeks of life. And if I would have stopped the camera right there and said, how's life going for you? You'd have said, it stinks. Okay, it's terrible. All I'm experiencing is pain. But by the time you were 3, you didn't even remember it.
Well, I mean, yeah, so if you don't remember it, then it's fine. You know, whatever you go through, it's all fine. You know, as long as you don't remember it. Why are you stealing that? Okay, that's fine. Take it. I don't care. Take it. Right? Yeah. Take it. Steal it. Is that all you needed? All right, he's just taking my share. All right, cool. Yeah, 666 years would also be good. Yeah. 69,000, more like it, right? Okay, where was I? All right. Oh, okay.
Really? I had a surgery when I was, I don't know. I didn't. Why? Because the context of your life determines the way you perceive evil.
I mean, I don't know that it does, but I don't know what context or any of this has to do with like perception of pain. Like, okay, you can get kind of deep into philosophy. So if I hook up Satan's little helper here to an electric chair and zap him for an hour, you know, that's going to hurt for that hour. But then I hook him up to a machine and make him forget the last hour so he doesn't remember it. What was evil done? It's an open question, you know. So if you don't remember it, does it count? Like, you don't remember the suffering, so it doesn't count anymore, right? Like, that could be a possibility, or maybe that you experienced it at all, whether you remember or not. That's what matters. Because in that moment, you're suffering, and that's what's negative and bad. So whether you remember or not, that's not really what matters in the end. I just don't believe that the ends justify the means. That's me personally. I reject that notion that the ends could be wonderful and terrific, but that the means were bad to get there. That's not good, you know?
That was something you had to endure for a short period of time. By the time you're 3, 4, 5, you've already forgotten about it. Now think about this. If life is a ray and not a line segment, every year that you step into eternity, that 90-year period is shorter and shorter and shorter by comparison to eternity. You might suffer something. You might have a terrible 90.
Yeah. Okay, so that doesn't change that it happened, you know? And I had somebody argue the exact opposite, that your trauma never goes away. And I think he was wrong about that. It's like, oh, you know, let's say that you cause somebody to have a trauma, and so you have to suffer forever because that trauma didn't go in. Like, yes, it did. It goes away when they die. Because my thought of how celestial judgment should go, in my view, is that you would go through a process where you would get, or have to experience, other people's emotions. So if you affected them positively, you would feel that. And if you affected them negatively, you would feel that as well. And then, like, maybe you could decide what order you want to go in. Like, you're like, hey, look, give me an hour of good stuff, then an hour of bad. Or maybe, you know, give me 5 good things, 2 bad things, and then 5 more good things, right? Or whatever. But eventually it's going to be a finite set, because you're going to run out of people that you affected eventually. And maybe it's only immediate people, or maybe it goes on for a large number of people. But whatever it is, it's going to be finite. It's not going to be an infinite amount. So your suffering wouldn't be infinite, nor would your pleasure be infinite. At some point, you would run out of experiences that you had caused. And the question did come up in that little conversation I had where he was like, well, if you did something and they didn't notice, then you don't feel anything for that. I'm like, yeah, no. I mean, if you steal, like, well, if you stole from them, they didn't notice or whatever, they didn't feel bad about it because they never realized they were stolen from, you don't feel anything from that. I'm like, well, yeah, I guess not. I mean, if they didn't suffer, then yeah, no, you shouldn't have to suffer either for something that you didn't, you're suffering for the things that you caused, in other words. And who knows, once they know that you stole, maybe then that would cause them some emotion that then you could get punished with or whatever, if you really wanted celestial judgment to work that way, right? But it didn't matter, because his view of celestial judgment is like, no, you get fully rewarded based on a belief, or you get fully punished based on a non-belief. That's it. That's how that works. So same thing here is none of, he's trying to say, well, your small amount of pain in that moment compared to all of eternity, it's a little dot on the radar. Okay, really. So the problem there is we take that same idea and then we apply it to Jesus. I remember this video, it's like Jesus stubbed his toe for you or something like that. And the idea was, well, God's existed forever. And so it's not even anything to him. It's like, oh, I stubbed my toe. It's not even that to him, because it was, that amount of, it doesn't matter. It's like a day of suffering. So what? That's nothing to him, right? So Jesus didn't really suffer and die for your sins. He died, but it doesn't matter because he came back. So, and that's like nothing to God. That was like didn't even affect him even a little bit under this idea here, right? Oh, unless God, of course, isn't like us, so it doesn't count, right?
90 years. But by the time you're a million years into eternity, that 90 years is a millisecond compared to your experience with God in eternity.
Yeah, well, I don't know what it would be like, I mean, the first year in the eternal realm, what that would be like. It's kind of hard to conceptualize because there's different ideas of what that would be like. And you kind of have a very loose frame in Christianity to work on. But basically, you're either worshiping God all the time, which would suck, or you're just in God's presence, just kind of like you're there, existing, not doing much of anything. I think that would kind of suck too. There has to, we humans are so tuned to having challenges to overcome and things to do. We get bored. So unless I am very, very different as an entity, then I'd run out of stuff to do. Unless I could talk to people, I could learn all sorts of things. But then doesn't that make life not matter in the grand scheme of things? Because what in the world could you possibly do here on Earth that would matter in the afterlife? If you're going to keep existing forever and all the time, anything and everything that you could have done here could have been done there. So why not just start you there to begin with? It falls apart immediately.
If life is as Christianity describes it, the problem of evil has to be mitigated in some way. Look, I get it.
No.
Evil's a problem for me as an atheist.
No, not at all. Because it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's in that moment, however long that moment was that you went through. And I'm guessing that he's thinking mostly about human caused evil, and meanwhile I'm thinking of all the things that can go wrong on this planet. I'm thinking of volcanoes erupting and hurricanes and other natural well, we call them disasters, but there's just natural weather that happens, right? So, and then I don't just think of humans, I think of all the animals and insects and plants and all living creatures, because who knows how much they're aware of pain or what that's like for them. I don't know. So what purpose is there that some deer gets tangled up in a hole and can't get out, and they break their leg in a hole that's just there from rain or whatever in the forest? Nobody else is around, nobody's there to see it, just the deer was walking through the forest, fell in a hole, broke its leg, and it can't get out, and it's just suffering and eventually dies from dehydration. What purpose did that serve in the celestial sense? The deer keep living in the eternal realm, and then that won't feel so bad anymore. But that's only true if you believe that animals go to heaven, and some people don't. So, what purpose does that suffering have for that creature? If I was there, I could save that deer potentially. I could get them out of the hole before they broke their leg, or I could get them out of the hole and then put their leg in a cast and take care of them until they're able to frolic again. So I appear to care more about the deer's suffering than this deity, and yet the Bible says, like, look at the sparrow, like God cares about that more. You are cared about more than the sparrow. Yeah, well, that doesn't actually help very much, because I've seen sparrows that fell and died because they fell down. It's like, we rescued a sparrow once. It was a wonderful pet for a long time until it expired. It was really sad to see it go. It fell out of its nest wherever it was, and if we hadn't picked it up and saved it, it would have died. So where's God there? Well, God was helping us to know that the thing was there. I mean, what? Why? Why? I thought God cared about the sparrow. I mean, and it's like with the deer, nobody's around. Nobody would know if God saved the deer from the hole. So your whole free will argument goes out the window. And if you don't believe that animals have an eternal life, then that whole argument goes out the window. But it just, like, why is this loving being that supposedly cares about the creatures, why is it not just permitting the suffering of all these creatures, but doing absolutely nothing to mitigate it, nothing to stop it or mend it or lessen it to any degree? Why? Your explanation only works if we focus in on humans and only on human-caused tragedy or evil. So when we look at the entire planet, it doesn't work. And then if you look at, it's like, look, the giant wave came and wiped out a whole bunch of people. They were just chilling, or what was that one where all the people got wiped out at once and a volcano erupted and their bodies are like perfectly preserved because the blast was so hot, like it just melted them in place, right? What were they doing? That just, oh well, hey, you're in heaven now. Yeah, that's fine. It just doesn't work.
When I was an atheist, because I always thought everything had to happen in 90 years. But if that view is incorrect, if the Christian worldview is true, all of us are eternal creatures. And no matter what happens to you, it has to be measured in the context, not of 90 years, but of eternity.
It doesn't excuse any of it, though. Doesn't make up for any of it. This is more ends justify the means. Oh, I'm going to kidnap you and hold you hostage. I'm going to torture you, your friends, and family in front of each other for 5 years. You're gonna have mental torture and physical torture, and it's just gonna be crazy. You know, there'd be days and weeks where it's just loud and obnoxious music being piped in so you can't sleep, flashing lights, cold water sprayed on you, you know, all sorts of terrible, deprived things that I force you to do with and to each other, and you know, and just terrible, horrible, whatever the most awful torture is, plus and then some. And then after all that 5 years, I let you all go. I mend your wounds. I treat you, and then I give you all $1 billion. You all get $1 billion. You get a tax-free. You get a big giant mansion. You get all these free vehicles. You get free medical and mental care for the rest of your lives. You get to go on some vacation, you know, and you get all these wonderful things, and that goes on for the rest of your life. You get all these wonderful gifts. Did that make up for the 5 years of torture and torment? Did it? Is it okay now? Is what are you able to come and shake my hand and thank me for all that? Really? Is that really how you think humans work?
That's why eternity changes everything. Okay, look at our diagram again for a second. So we've looked at just one of 7 explanations for why God might allow any act of evil. The other 6 we'll cover in the participant's guide. But even this, the issue of eternity, goes a long way to explain why God would allow something bad to happen to us.
And it doesn't at all, and doesn't it help explain why things happen to other creatures or anything else alive? So yeah, it still doesn't, like, why have it? What purpose does it serve to have it all? It doesn't. It's still a thing that happened. It's just
He's not concerned about your comfort in your material life. He's concerned about your character through eternity.
Okay. So God doesn't care, after all, about your existence here. It's only there. Wow. What an asshole. Your character? Okay. So all the bad things are just for character development. Yes. Yes. All that suffering and pain you must endure. But that makes even less sense. Well, okay, maybe you could make an argument, okay, for Christians, because they're going to get that eternity. But for the non-Christians, they're going to get an eternity of torment. So what purpose does the bad stuff happening in their life during the time here on Earth matter then? Interesting how he leaves that out.
But we don't even know, really, if you look at this, what his priorities are. I mean, we don't know if his first priority is which one of those 7 things. All of this has to go into our description of why God would allow anything to happen.
Well, I mean, when you're trying to make an ad hoc explanation of something that you have failed to demonstrate is a thing in the first place, I suppose anything goes.
But now let me ask you this. Why are you calling this thing evil to begin with? Because you don't like it?
Well, I mean, you're the one that started calling it evil. I mean, I'll call it suffering. Okay? Why is there suffering in this world? Why do living creatures have properties that allow them to feel negative feelings that are unpleasant to have? And well, there's a very easy explanation. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't survive very long. So very primitive, I guess, I don't know if the word primitive is the right word to use, but very, simple creatures have a sense that lets them get towards the light because there's more food where there's light. And so that sense is attractive. It is spurred on by an impulse to go towards that. And so if they're taken away from that light, then there's maybe a feeling of badness or panic or something's wrong. And then the more complex that thing develops over time, the more sophisticated that system's going to be, and going towards the things that allow it to survive and procreate or replicate, versus getting away from the things that will destroy it, eat it, kill it, whatever. And over time, it's going to develop that into a pain and pleasure system. So, purely materialistic world, the reason you feel pain when you get hurt is so that you can do something about that. Sadly, we don't have that much control over our pain. And I say that because some people are continuously in pain, and yet they are getting help for it, so they take medication to dull the pain. If this was something that a creator made to help us survive, it could have made it that it alarms us, beep, 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 beep. Hey, you need to get your foot looked at because you stepped on a tack. Oh, okay. And that alarm could just be an alarm. It doesn't have to hurt. It doesn't have to make me feel things. I don't have to feel the piercing of the tack into my flesh and the searing owness that causes of pain. It could just be an alarm that's like, beep, beep, beep. Go get this fixed. And then I go get it fixed, and the alarm's like, okay, cool. Or I say, hey, okay, I'm on my way. I'm going to get it fixed. And then the alarm could stop, and like maybe it could check back in a little bit to see if I got it fixed or not, And then, it's like, hey, your back's all screwed up. Beep, beep, beep. Like, yeah, I know my back's all screwed up. Oh, your back is still screwed up. I'm aware of that. I did everything I could for it. So can you just turn off the alarm indefinitely? Okay, just let you know the back's all screwed up, but I'm turning off the alarm now. Okay, all right, great. Hey, you screwed up your back even more. Okay, yeah, I know. All right, let me know later. And that's it. Then the alarm's off, and then that's it. That's the end of the. But that's not what we have, because we evolved. We weren't made with any specific purpose in mind. But here we have someone ad hoc explaining why we experience pain and suffering, which he calls evil. Because that's what evil is causing pain and suffering onto others, whether they are humans or animals or whatever. There was some skit on Mad TV or Saturday. I don't think it was Saturday Night Live. I think it was Mad TV, where they grabbed this cockroach and tortured it. Let's see if I can find that for you, because it's relevant to this to some degree.
You don't like what happened to Jackie? Look, if you don't like it, you can. If evil is just the stuff you don't like, well, you could actually eliminate all evil tomorrow. You know how you do it? Change your mind. But that won't get it done. You know that what happened to Jackie was truly evil. It broke a standard beyond your personal opinion, even beyond the opinion of your group. In other words, there's a standard that transcends all of us that you are measuring something against to determine that it's evil. C.S. Lewis once said it this way too. He said he used to complain about God's existence because the world is so unjust. But what was he measuring against when he called the world unjust? If there is no objective, transcendent, holy standard of righteousness, then there is no true evil. There's just stuff you don't like.
No, there's absolutely evil or suffering or whatever with or without that notion. And even if not, and I have to say it's just stuff I don't like, okay, I don't like it. And I don't want it to be a thing. So my objection still stands if there isn't a standard. I'm still saying this sucks. And you saying that's just your opinion doesn't make me think it sucks any less. I'm still going to complain about it. I'm still going to point it out. But the problem is, once again, with apologetics here, you're strawmanning the actual argument of evil in order to make your case for why evil's a thing. It completely and wholly ignoring what is said in typical arguments of evil, because they're usually phrased quite well, but you know, you don't want to do that. Let's see, Mad TV. Oh, what was it? Teach bugs a lesson. Oh man, wait. I'm not gonna find this. Am I? No. Oh well, whatever. Anyways, I can't find it. Regardless, in the clip, it was this bug got stuck in like a roach motel sort of thing, and the mechanical arms grab it, pull its limbs out, and poke a hot iron rod in its butt and hit its head, and then they release it. It's like, teach those bugs a lesson, right? It's like, it's funny, but it's like, yeah, I think that we kill bugs, you know, without much of a thought about it. But I do think that torturing bugs is wrong. Killing them, that's fine. But torturing them, no. Because I don't know what that creature is feeling as I do that. But even more, it's probably going to screw up my brain to some degree to torture another living being. And if I get used to torturing a bug, maybe I can go up to a mammal, and then I can go up to a human, and so on and so forth. But as far as being able to measure what's good and bad, and there's an absolute good or a real good, you can do that just with concepts alone. But this is the very typical approach of, you can't have evil unless there's a good thing or whatever. Like, no, yeah, you can. Or it's just opinion, yeah, whatever. It's still valid, you know.
But because there is true evil, we know there must therefore be an objective standard of righteousness. You cannot have the shadows without the sunlight.
What?
The shadows prove the sunlight.
No.
So even...
do you know how shadows work? What? What? That's what I was saying earlier. Like, he's going to go that route of, you know, evil it's an absence of good or absence of sunlight. Yeah, guess what? Get enough mirrors and you'll never have any shadows. So your whole analogy is completely fraudulent.
Even to say that something is evil is not to say that it eliminates God's existence. You couldn't have true evil if there wasn't a God to set the standard for righteousness.
Yes, you could, and we do. We have a standard, and I made the standard. Nitty made a standard. Satan's little helper made a standard. Everybody can have their own standard. And you go, oh, but that's subject. It doesn't matter. Still a standard. Doesn't make it any less, but because it's not objective. Well, I don't know. We can all agree upon a standard. For example, chess. Chess is a great example of this. Humans made chess, no doubt about it. Humans invented the rules of chess, no doubt about it. When you sit down to play chess with somebody, you are agreeing to play by certain rules. And for the most part, people have the same rules everywhere you go. There's a rule of chess I didn't know about called like fox passing or something weird like that, where like if you move a pawn past another pawn, you can take it or whatever. I never heard of that before. So I did, but regardless, everyone can play by the same rules, even though the rules were subjective. And if you say, hey, look, I want to have it be that the pawns move like rooks in this game, you can agree to play by those new rules with the person you're playing with, but you still have to have rules. The fact that the rules were subjective doesn't matter. And if you want to change the rules, you have to agree to that. Because you can't play the game without rules. Now, if you're constantly changing the rules all the time in order to try to win, the person's not going to keep playing with you because it's an unfair game you're playing. And that's all he's doing, is playing a game with this idea that an all-loving being that can do anything would allow for people and creatures and living things to suffer and die because reasons.
So let's go back to our diagram for a second. It used to be that people would say, hey, evil is that one thing that eliminates God from the equation. But it turns out you can't have that thing unless there is a God to set the standard. So evil is not exculpatory. It's inculpatory. It actually points, like all the other 7 pieces, to the existence of God as the standard.
No, it doesn't. And of course, again, you're completely misrepresenting the argument of evil, because of course you are. There's many formats of the argument from evil. Here's one I found. Let me see. Here's just one, just randomly I found. The argument of evil is a class of arguments that purport the existence of evil is incompatible with the existence of God, right? As he put it, is he willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is impotent. If he is able but not willing, then he is malevolent. If he is both able and willing, once then is evil. There you go. So that kind of sums up the argument of evil. And then there's other things you could say. Problem of Evil from Stanford, and they have a more lengthy description of it. And they have it laid out thus, a bunch of, these could be premises. In fact, they should have been, but whatever. And this is a hypothetical. It's a very long hypothetical, but nonetheless, okay. If it's, not all gods are omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect, but some concepts of gods are. So this one is saying that God exists only if it is those things. And then it then says, if it's those things, then it has this power to eliminate all evil, and it knows where evil is, and it has the desire to eliminate it, but evil exists. So either God doesn't actually have the power to eliminate all evil, or doesn't know where evil exists, or doesn't have the desire. So since it doesn't have these, and these things are required for God to exist, then God can't exist. But these things have to be part of what makes God able to exist. So if your God is not omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect, then this argument doesn't matter to you. All it does is negate certain types of God concepts. Saying that evil doesn't exist unless God exists is presuppositionalism and circular, and ignores the point of the argument. You could replace the word evil with suffering. You could, and then you can't say, "Oh, suffering doesn't exist if God doesn't exist." You can't say that, can you? So why not go after the strongest argument possible? Argument of suffering. If there is a supremely powerful and knowledgeable person, he can abolish the widespread suffering that we find in this world. And even you and I can abolish some of it. And so, but if they were supremely good, they would abolish it, or at least diminish it. Hence, there's no being who is supremely powerful, supremely knowledgeable, and supremely good. That is, a supremely perfect being does not exist. So there you go. Widespread suffering. And we know that exists with or without God. Checkmate. Go after that argument, you cold case person. No, of course not. Because you wouldn't be able to do anything with it, would you? You could say the same things. Oh, well, suffering in an eternal sense makes sense, and yada, yada. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You don't need suffering. What good does suffering do in the sense of an eternity? It shapes your character. That's all. He said that earlier. He said God just cares about your character in eternity, but doesn't want to interfere with my free will, if I have free will. But it wants me to be a certain way. So just make me the certain way that you want then. Because it doesn't seem like you really do care about free will in the end. You want me, it's like, I want you to be a lawyer, but you have any choice you make, but I'll be really disappointed with you if you're not a lawyer. Then it's not really that you have the free will to choose, because you're being guilt tripped into being the lawyer, right? Yeah. So let's see. The problem of evil is God's, not a problem for us. It's inconsistent with other things Christians believe God has. Yeah, I mean, it is inconsistent with certain concepts of God, but the apologist has to make excuses, and that's what this is. This isn't evidence for God. These are excuses that you've come up with to justify your God's inaction regarding evil.
Look at our suspect description now. Just look at it for a second.
It's just so incoherent. Because he has this whole shtick of, this reminds me of that so-called journalist that did the same thing. What's his face? Lee Strobel. Same sort of thing. All right, so what's the nature of this suspect? Well, we don't know, because there's no way to prove any of these things. External to the universe. Okay, it doesn't exist because there isn't anything outside of the universe. Non-spatial, atemporal, and non-material. So it really doesn't exist because there's no where for it to exist. There's no when for it to exist. And it's not made out of anything. Uncaused? Right. Well, okay, if you say so. But I've got an argument for that too, just because I can. Anything that's uncaused cannot exist. There you go. That's my only argument. That's it. That's just my statement. It's one premise. Only things that are caused can exist. Anything uncaused cannot exist. Therefore, if God is uncaused, it cannot exist. There you go. Premise 1, 2, and 3. Boom. Done. Oh. Anyways, let's see. What else is up here? Powerful enough to create everything we see in the universe. Where's that power come from? How does that work? Specifically purposeful enough to produce a universe fine-tuned for life, but didn't do a very good job of that, because life doesn't seem to be all over the universe, and it sure took the universe a while to get to the point where it could habit life at all, and it seems like that's actually backwards. It seems like life adapted for the universe, not the other way around, but whatever, sure, whatever. Intelligent and communicative. Well, that doesn't seem to be apparent. It doesn't seem to be that smart. And as far as communication goes, I haven't heard a peep from God yet. Still waiting. Hey, look, I'm doing a live stream right now, God. Check it out. If you can hear me, and apparently you can, say hi to all the people here. Just say hi. The word hi. That's all. Just say hi. No? Okay. Say anything at all. No? Okay. Well, I guess God's not that communicative after all. That was easy to negate. Creative and resourceful. What does that mean? Resourceful? Doesn't it just wish things into existence? You don't need resources if you can do that. As far as creative, I don't know what that means in this context. If you know everything, are you really creating anything? You're just pulling on knowledge of what you know is going to be. I don't know that that's creative, but whatever, sure, whatever. A conscious mind. How do you have a conscious mind without a brain? Free to choose and create personally. Okay, that's also humans, so I'm not... Whatever. The personal source of moral truth and obligation. Yeah, right. And the standard the standard for good by which we define evil, right? And so it does all this evil because it says that in the Bible. It says God created good and evil. It says it in the Bible. So, yeah, it's a standard of good that stands by and does nothing. Will all sorts of terrible things happen because eventually it's going to make up for it in the end. That doesn't sound very good to me. All right, so that's it. Nothing here. Not evidence for God at all. But that doesn't surprise me because he doesn't have that. And as far as knocking down the argument of evil or the problem of evil or suffering, he hasn't done that. It's just excuses, empty tries to explain it. There's other ways you could try. Now I think that the concept that you have of God is going to have to change in order to account for the suffering on the planet. And it's going to wind up looking like a very different God at the end of the day if you actually use logic to try to figure out how to square this square peg into the round hole. The concept of God that many apologists preach is incompatible with the reality that we observe, but they don't want that to be true, so they ad hoc explain away the injustices that their God allows. If you allow for God to be amoral or not all-powerful, then there's leeway. But that would be a different concept of God. And for some, that's not something that they can accept because they've gone to worship an idea about God and they're not interested in finding the real God if there is indeed a real God to find. The only way to find the actual God, if there is a thing to find, would be to base your ideas of what God is or isn't like upon the observations that you make of reality, not the other way around. Not to start with the assumption of what God is like and try to then explain why reality is the way it is to square the pegs of your explanation of God into those things. So whatever God is a thing that does not communicate with us in any way that we can detect it, at least not empirically or repeatedly testable. It is not something that intervenes with our lives in any detectable way. It isn't something that seems to care about life at all. It doesn't seem to have that big of a role, if any role, in creating anything. It seems to be very much a thing that maybe is out there that we haven't found yet. But all of that still based on extraordinary extrapolation that I'm making. I'm saying if this thing is a thing, but why should I think that it could even be a thing? Those are all my expectations of what it is. Maybe if it's out there and I find it, then I can talk about it. But until then, perhaps I should be skeptical of its existence. And maybe you should as well.